The word hit Ethan Corleone like a bullet. Mommy. He froze in the doorway of his mansion's nursery, his briefcase slipping from his fingers and hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. His heart stopped. His breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his throat, because the voice of that small, fragile, impossible voice came from his son who had never spoken. Not once, not in 2 years. Both twins sat on the floor, their bodies trembling with effort, their eyes locked on the maid kneeling before them. Clarice Sullivan, dressed in her simple black uniform, had both arms stretched toward the boys, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Say it again. Mommy." The second twin spoke now. Oliver's lips moved, shaping the word that doctors said would never come. His brother Felix reached one shaking hand toward Clarice, fingers stretching, grasping for something Ethan couldn't see. The room tilted. Ethan's vision blurred. His sons, born paralyzed, diagnosed as permanently nonverbal, confined to a world of silence, were speaking. And they were calling the Maid, the one name that shattered every wall he built around his grief. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Unbroken Truths. Before we dive deeper into this shocking moment, tell me, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, because stories like this one will remind you that miracles happen in the most unexpected places. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to the moment that changed everything. Ethan couldn't move. He stood there, paralyzed himself, watching the woman he hired 3 weeks ago do what millions of dollars in medical treatments couldn't. She was bringing his children back to life. But how? And why were they calling her mommy? Clarice didn't see him watching. Her entire focus remained on the twins, her voice soft and steady, like she was afraid one wrong word would break the spell. "That's it, sweetheart, you're doing so good." Ethan's chest tightened. His wife Mia had died giving birth to these boys. He spent 2 years trying to fill the emptiness with specialists, therapy, and cold hospital rooms that smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. He prayed in silence. He wept where no one could see. And now this stranger, this maid, was unlocking something he thought was lost forever. He took one step back, then another. The door closed with a soft click, but the word followed him down the hallway, echoing in his mind like a ghost he couldn't escape. Mommy, mommy, mommy. What had Clarice Sullivan done to his sons? And what secret was she hiding that made the impossible possible? Ethan Corleone was a man who controlled everything. At 34, he owned half of Houston's commercial real estate. His name appeared on buildings that touched the clouds. Board members straightened their ties when he entered a room. Competitors studied his moves like generals studying war. He built an empire from nothing, turned his father's small construction company into a billion-dollar corporation, and never let anyone see him break. But grief had broken him anyway. 2 years ago, Mia Wick had kissed him goodbye before heading to the hospital for what should have been a routine delivery. She never came home. Complications, internal bleeding. The doctors used words that sounded like apologies, but Ethan heard them as sentences. His wife was gone. His sons survived, but were barely born 3 months early. Their tiny bodies too fragile, their brains starved of oxygen during those critical moments when everything went wrong. Severe motor impairment, nonverbal, minimal cognitive response. The doctors had been clear. His boys would never walk, never talk, never live anything close to a normal life. Ethan had refused to believe it. He flew in specialists from Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, even Switzerland. He converted an entire wing of his mansion into a medical facility. Physical therapists, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, they rotated through his home like shifts at a hospital. Nothing worked. The silence in his house grew heavier with each passing month. He stopped playing music, stopped hosting dinners, fired the staff who tried to make small talk. He wanted order, control, predictability. If he couldn't save his sons, he could at least manage the environment around them. Then 3 weeks ago, the agency sent Clarice Sullivan. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, carrying a single worn duffel bag and a notebook with frayed edges. Early 30s, medium height, with warm brown skin and eyes that seemed to notice everything without judgment. Her resume was unremarkable: previous work in hospitals and private homes around Dallas. references that praised her reliability and gentle nature. Ethan had barely looked at her during the interview. "The twins require round-the-clock care," he said, not making eye contact. "You'll assist the nurses, clean the medical equipment, keep the nursery sterile, don't get attached." "Yes, sir," Clarice replied quietly. But something in her voice made him glance up. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, toward the nursery door, where the faint sound of medical monitors beeped their steady rhythm. "Can I meet them?" she asked. "That's not necessary." "Please." He almost said no, but exhaustion made him weak. 5 minutes. She walked into that nursery, and Ethan watched from the hallway as she approached the twins' medical cribs. Oliver and Felix lay motionless as always, their eyes staring at nothing. Clarice stood there for a long moment, just watching them breathe. Then she did something no other caregiver had ever done. She sang, not loudly, just a soft hum, barely more than a whisper, a melody Ethan didn't recognize. And for the first time in months, he saw Felix's eyes shift, just slightly, toward the sound. "That's enough," Ethan had said quickly, his voice sharp. Clarice had stopped immediately. "Yes, sir." But when she walked past him, he caught the trace of a sad smile on her lips, like she saw something he couldn't. Over the following weeks, Ethan tried to ignore her. She moved through the house like a ghost, cleaning, organizing, never speaking unless spoken to. But the nurses started mentioning things, small things. The boys seemed calmer when Clarice is in the room. Oliver turned his head when she walked by. Felix made a sound today. It was barely anything, but it happened while she was reading to them. Ethan had dismissed it all, wishful thinking. The nurses project their own hope onto random coincidences. His sons were nonverbal. The diagnosis was clear. Until this morning. Until that word. Mommy. Now Ethan sat in his study, the door locked, his hands shaking as he opened his laptop. He pulled up Clarice's background check, the one his head of security had run before hiring her. Clean record, no red flags. Born in Dallas, raised by a single mother who worked as a domestic worker. Clarice had dropped out of nursing school in her 20s due to financial hardship and worked various caregiving jobs since then. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained what he just witnessed. He grabbed his phone and called Dr. Morrison, the neurologist who'd been treating the twins since birth. "Ethan," the doctor answered warmly. "Is everything all right?" My son spoke. Silence. "Doc Morrison." "Ethan, that's not possible. We've discussed this, their neural pathways. I heard them, both of them. They said a word." More silence. Then, "What word?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Mommy." The doctor's voice shifted, becoming more clinical. "Ethan, I know how badly you want progress, but sometimes our minds can trick us into... I'm not imagining it. Then bring them in tomorrow. Let me run some tests. But Ethan, please, don't get your hopes up. If you've been following this channel, you know that hope is exactly what changes everything. Drop a comment below if you believe in miracles. I want to hear from you." Ethan hung up without responding. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Texas sun blazed over perfectly manicured lawns that his sons would never run across. A playground sat empty, swings motionless, slides untouched. He built it anyway, back when denial felt like faith. A knock sounded at his door. "Come in," he said quietly. Clarice entered, still in her uniform, her hands folded in front of her. "Sir, I wanted to apologize if I overstepped. I didn't mean to." "How did you do it?" She blinked. "Sir, my son spoke. To you." "How?" Clarice's expression softened. "I didn't do anything special, Mr. Corleone. I just talked to them, like they could understand. They can't." "Are you sure?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ethan stared at her. This woman who walked into his home as a stranger and somehow reached his children in ways $1 million couldn't. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Nothing, sir. Just to help." "Nobody helps for nothing." Clarice's eyes held his. "Maybe you've been around the wrong people." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from the night nurse. "Both boys are asking for Clarice. Won't settle down." Ethan looked up at her. "They're asking for you." "Then I should go to them." She turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped her. "Clarice." "Yes, sir." "Tomorrow. I want to watch you with them. I need to understand what's happening." She nodded slowly. "Of course." After she left, Ethan sank into his chair. His mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. Who was this woman? What did she know that an army of medical professionals didn't? And why did his sons who never responded to their own father reach for her like she was the answer to prayers he stopped saying? Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. And somewhere in the nursery, Clarice Sullivan hummed that same mysterious melody while two little boys who weren't supposed to speak tried to sing along. The next morning arrived heavy with secrets. Ethan woke before dawn, his sleep fractured by dreams he couldn't remember but felt in his bones. He quickly dressed in a tailored suit, perfect tie, the armor of a man who needed control. But his hands trembled as he knotted the silk, and he had to start over twice. At 6:47 a.m., he stood outside the nursery door, listening. Clarice's voice drifted through the crack, soft and rhythmic. She was reading something, pausing between sentences like she expected a response. The medical monitors beeped their steady pattern, but underneath, barely audible, Ethan heard something else. Sounds. Small, broken attempts at vocalization. His sons were trying to speak. He pushed the door open slowly. Clarice sat cross-legged on the floor between the twins' adaptive chairs, a children's book open in her lap. Oliver and Felix weren't looking at the pictures. They were looking at her, their eyes tracking every movement of her lips. "Morning sunshine?" Clarice said without turning around. "The boys were just telling me about their dreams." Ethan stepped inside. "They can't tell you anything." "Can't they?" She glanced back at him, and something in her expression made him feel like a student being corrected by a patient teacher. Oliver here was making sounds in his sleep, happy sounds, and Felix woke up smiling. "That's communication, Mr. Corleone." "That's interpretation." "Maybe." She turned back to the boys. "What do you think, Felix? Was I wrong?" Felix's mouth opened, his face scrunched with effort, muscles working against years of paralysis. Then impossibly a sound emerged. Ethan's breath caught. Clarice leaned closer, encouraging. "That's it, baby. You're doing so good." "No," Felix breathed out, the word barely formed but unmistakable. The room tilted. Ethan grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. He answered you." "He did." Clarice's voice remained calm, like miracles were simply facts waiting to be acknowledged. "They've been practicing, little sounds, small words. They understand more than anyone gives them credit for." "That's impossible. Their cognitive function is exactly what we expect it to be when we expect nothing." She closed the book and stood, brushing off her uniform. "Mr. Corleone, can I show you something?" Without waiting for permission, she walked to the corner of the nursery where a bookshelf held medical supplies and sterilized equipment. She reached behind a stack of clean linens and pulled out a worn notebook, the same one Ethan had seen her writing in. "I found this 3 days after I started working here," she said, handing it to him. "It was wedged between the wall and the shelf. I think it belonged to your wife." Ethan's hands went numb. He recognized the handwriting before he even focused on the words. Mia's looping script covered the page's shopping lists, baby name ideas, nursery color schemes. And near the middle, a section titled "Songs for My Boys." His vision blurred. "Where did you find this?" "Right there, hidden, like maybe she dropped it and no one noticed." Clarice's voice softened. "There's a lullaby in there. She wrote the melody out phonetically, like she wanted to remember it exactly. I've been singing it to Oliver and Felix." Ethan's throat closed. He flipped through pages, each one a ghost of the life he'd lost. Mia's voice echoed in his memory. Her laugh, her terrible singing that she insisted was perfect, the way she pressed her hand to her belly and whispered promises to the babies she never met. On the last written page, he found words that stopped his heart. "If I'm not there to say these words myself, let someone else say them. Every child deserves to hear. You are loved, you are seen, you are worth every star in the sky." Below it, a simple melody with lyrics Ethan had never heard. "She made this," he whispered, "for them." Clarice moved beside him, pointing to a small note at the bottom. "Look at the date." Ethan's eyes focused. The entry was dated 2 days before Mia died, before the emergency C-section, before everything shattered. She knows. Somehow, she knew. "I've been singing it every night," Clarice said quietly. "And every night they try to hum along. They remember it, Mr. Corleone. Somewhere deep down, they remember their mother's love." Ethan couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The notebook trembled in his hands like something holy and heartbreaking all at once. A small sound pulled him back. Oliver was making a noise, not words, but something closer. A melody, the same one Clarice had been humming. Felix joined in, his voice a whisper-thin echo. They were singing. His paralyzed, nonverbal sons were singing their mother's lullaby. "No," Ethan breathed. This can't." "It is," Clarice said firmly. "And you can either accept it or keep pretending they're not trying to reach you." Her words hit like a slap. Ethan's head snapped toward her, anger flashing hot. "You don't know anything about my family. I know your sons are fighting every single day to be seen, and I know you're terrified to look. I've done everything, except be present." Clarice's voice didn't rise, but it cut clean through his defenses. "You've hired experts and bought equipment and built medical wings, but when's the last time you sat on this floor and just listened to them breathe? When did you last hold their hands without checking a monitor? When did you last tell them you love them without a nurse in the room?" Ethan's face burned. "You have no right." "You're right. I don't." She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "But they do. They have every right to a father who sees them as miracles instead of problems to solve. And your wife," she gestured to the notebook. "She knew that. She wrote it down because she was afraid you'd forget." Silence crashed through the room like thunder. Ethan wanted to scream, wanted to fire her on the spot, wanted to throw her out of his house for daring to speak to him like this. But he couldn't move, because she was right. If this story is hitting you deep, don't just watch, engage. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever been so afraid of pain that you stopped seeing love? Let's talk about it. And smash that subscribe button because this story is about to get even more intense. Oliver made another sound, pulling both their attention. The little boy's eyes were wide, focused on his father with an intensity that felt almost urgent. Ethan's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, his breath coming in short gasps. "He's trying to say Daddy," Clarice whispered. "He's been practicing for 3 days." Oliver tried again, his face red with effort. Ethan stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside his son's chair. "I'm here," he choked out. "I'm right here, buddy." But Oliver's eyes drifted past him, back to Clarice. The rejection cut deeper than any diagnosis. "He doesn't know you yet," Clarice said gently, "but he wants to. You just have to show up." Ethan stayed on his knees, staring at the son who looked through him like glass. 2 years of living in the same house, and his own child didn't recognize him as anything more than a stranger. "What do I do?" His voice cracked on the words. Clarice knelt beside him. "You start by being here. Not the businessman, not the grieving husband. Just a father." "I don't know how." "Then learn." She picked up the notebook and placed it in his hands. "Start with this. Read to them. Sing to them. Let them hear your voice without instructions or therapy goals. Just love." Ethan looked down at Mia's handwriting, the lullaby she composed for sons she never held. His chest felt like it was caving in, every defense he built collapsing under the weight of truth. "I can't," he whispered. "You can." Clarice stood, then paused. "Your wife believed in miracles, Mr. Corleone. That's what this notebook is proof that she never stopped hoping. The question is, do you?" She walked toward the door, leaving him kneeling between his sons with his late wife's words burning in his hands. "Clarice," he called out, his voice raw. She stopped, turning back. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care?" For the first time since she arrived, something vulnerable flickered across her face. "Because someone once gave up on me, and I know what that silence feels like." Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. Ethan sat alone with Oliver and Felix, the notebook open in his lap, his heart cracked wide open. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over Houston, turning the morning gray. And in that quiet nursery, surrounded by medical equipment and broken dreams, a billionaire finally understood what he lost when he stopped believing in impossible things. His sons weren't the only ones who were paralyzed. He had been too. The question was, could he find his voice again before it was too late? The storm broke that afternoon. Ethan canceled every meeting, ignored 17 calls from his VP of operations, sent his assistant home early. For the first time in 2 years, the world outside his mansion could burn. He wasn't leaving this nursery. He sat on the floor, legs crossed awkwardly in his $1,000 suit, Mia's notebook open before him. Oliver and Felix watched him with curious eyes, their small bodies still in their adaptive chairs. "Okay," Ethan breathed. Your mom wrote this for you. So, here goes. He began to read. His voice cracked on the first line about moonlight and magic. The words felt foreign in his mouth, too soft for a man who spent years barking orders in boardrooms. Felix's eyes drifted closed. Oliver yawned. Ethan stopped. I'm boring them. You're trying too hard, Clarice said from the doorway. He hadn't heard her enter. She carried fresh linens, but her eyes were on him, assessing, measuring. Read it like you mean it, like you're talking to Mia. She's dead. Not to them. Clarice moved into the room, setting the linens aside. To them, she's every word in that book, every song you sing, every moment you show up. Ethan looked down at the page. The lullaby stared back Mia's looping handwriting, her careful notation of melody. He cleared his throat and tried again, this time softer, more honest. Sleep, my stars, sleep so deep. Moonlight guards the dreams you keep. Oliver's head turned slightly. Toward the sound, Ethan's heart hammered. He kept going. Morning comes with golden sun, two brave souls, my only ones. Felix made a small noise. Not quite a hum, but close. Clarice knelt beside him, her voice joining his for the last line. Their words wove together, creating something that filled the sterile nursery with warmth. When the song ended, silence held the room like a prayer. Again, Clarice whispered. They want to hear it again. So Ethan sang it again and again. By the fourth time, his voice steadied. By the sixth, he closed his eyes and let the melody carry him back to a hospital room where Mia had hummed this same tune with her hand on her swollen belly. I'm so sorry I forgot, he thought. I'm so sorry I stopped singing. Hours blurred. The sun tracked across the windows. Nurses came and went, but Ethan barely noticed. He was too focused on the small victories. Oliver holding his gaze for 3 full seconds, Felix's fingers twitching in rhythm with the melody. Both boys making sounds that almost resembled words. Around 4 p.m., Clarice stood to leave. I need to prepare their dinner. Stay. Ethan looked up at her. Please, show me what else you do. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. Are you sure? I'm sure. She settled back down and pulled a small cloth book from her apron pocket. I read to them every afternoon. Nothing medical, just stories, silly ones mostly. What kind of stories? About dragons who are afraid of fire, princesses who save themselves, knights who win with kindness instead of swords. A small smile touched her lips. Your boys like the happy endings. She began to read, her voice animated, changing pitch for different characters. And Ethan watched his sons transform. Their eyes brightened, their bodies relaxed. Felix laughed a small, choked sound, but unmistakably joy. He laughed, Ethan breathed. Did you hear that? He laughed. He does that sometimes. Clarice turned a page, usually during the dragon parts. Why didn't anyone tell me? Did you ask? The question landed like a stone. No, he hadn't asked. He'd issued orders, reviewed reports, approved treatment plans, but he never sat down with his staff and said, tell me something good about my sons today. Clarice finished the story just as Oliver began to fuss. She glanced at the clock. Feeding time. Do you want to help? Ethan had watched nurses feed his sons 100 times through doorway cracks and security cameras. He never actually did it himself. I don't know how. I'll teach you. She guided him through the angle of the bottle, the pace, the gentle burping technique. Oliver resisted at first, turning his head away from his father's unfamiliar touch. But Clarice hummed that lullaby again, and slowly the baby relaxed. When Oliver finally latched onto the bottle Ethan held, tears blurred Ethan's vision. He's eating. From me. He trusts you. Clarice's voice was gentle. That's all this is? Trust. Are you still with me? Drop a comment if you're crying right now. I know I am. And if you haven't subscribed, do it. This story is about to take a turn that will wreck you in the best way possible. After feeding, Clarice showed him the evening routine, the gentle exercises that kept the boys' muscles from atrophy, the way she massaged their limbs while telling them stories, the soft music she played during their bath time. You do all this every day? Ethan asked, watching her work with practiced efficiency. Every day. She carefully dried Felix's small feet. Consistency matters. They need to know if someone shows up. The nurses, do their jobs. I will do this. She looked at him directly. There's a difference. Ethan understood. The nurses followed protocols. Clarice followed her heart. As evening deepened into night, Ethan finally stood to leave. His back ached from sitting on the floor. His suit was wrinkled beyond saving, but something inside him felt lighter than it had in years. "Same time tomorrow?" Clarice asked. "Earlier," Ethan said. "I want to be here when they wake up." Surprise flickered across her face. "What about your meetings?" "They can wait." He paused at the door. "Clarice, thank you for not giving up on them." "I'm not the one who needed to hear that, Mr. Corleone." He knew what she meant. He gave up. Somewhere between the diagnosis and the grief, he stopped believing his sons could be saved. He loved them, yes, but from a distance, through glass walls built by fear and pain. Clarice had walked straight through those walls like they didn't exist. That night, Ethan dreamed of Mia for the first time in months. In the dream, she sat in the nursery rocking chair, holding their sons whole and healthy while singing that lullaby. When she looked up at him, her eyes held no accusation, just hope. "Keep going," she seemed to say. "Keep showing up." He woke at dawn, with the words still echoing in his mind. And for the first time since she died, he understood. Mia hadn't left him a tragedy. She left him a mission. His sons needed him to believe when no one else would, to see miracles in small sounds and tiny movements, to love them not despite their limitations, but through them. Clarice had been doing it for 3 weeks. It was time for their father to do the same. 3 weeks passed in a blur of breakthrough moments. Ethan restructured his entire life. Mornings began at 5 a.m. in the nursery, not the office. Video conferences happened with his sons in his lap. He learned to read their subtle cues, the way Oliver scrunched his nose when uncomfortable, how Felix's breathing changed when he was happy. The twins started responding to him, small sounds, attempted words, genuine smiles that lit up the room. But they still reached for Clarice first. Always Clarice. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything shattered. Ethan entered the nursery early, hoping to surprise the boys before Clarice's shift. But voices stopped him at the door, Clarice's, and another woman's. Unfamiliar. Tense. "You can't keep running," the stranger said. "They'll find you eventually." "I just need more time." Clarice's voice cracked. "Please, Diane, a few more weeks." "These aren't your children. You know that, right? No matter how much you love them." "I know." Pain laced every word. "But they need me." "And what about what you need? A life? Safety? You can't hide in this mansion forever." Ethan's blood went cold. Hide? He pushed the door open. 2 women spun toward him, Clarice, pale and trembling, and an older black woman in nurse's scrubs with kind eyes and a worried expression. "Mr. Corleone," Clarice breathed, "I can explain." "Explain what? What are you hiding from?" His voice came out harder than intended, fear masking itself as anger. The other woman, Diane, stepped forward. "I'm Diane Mitchell, Clarice's former supervisor from Dallas General. I came to check on her." "Why would she need checking on?" Silence stretched like razor wire. Finally, Clarice spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because 6 months ago, I testified against a doctor who was abusing patients, vulnerable patients, children." Her hands trembled. "He's connected, wealthy, and he swore he'd make me pay for destroying his career." Ethan's world tilted. "You're in danger." "I thought I could disappear. That's why I took this job. Cash payment, private residence, no paper trail." She looked at Oliver and Felix, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant to stay this long. I never meant to." "To fall in love with them," Diane finished quietly. Clarice nodded, unable to speak. Ethan's mind raced. Everything suddenly made sense. Her reluctance to be photographed, the way she always parked her car behind the estate, her refusal to give personal references. She wasn't just a caregiver. She was a fugitive. "Does he know where you are?" Ethan asked, his voice deadly calm. "I don't think so. But Diane found me, which means others can too." Diane's expression was grave. "Dr. Vance has private investigators. He's been tracking former staff. 3 people have already been harassed, threatened. Clarice, you need to leave Houston." "No." The word exploded from Ethan. "Absolutely not." Both women stared at him. "She's not going anywhere," he continued, his mind already working through solutions. "I have the best security team in Texas. Lawyers who've never lost a case. If this man is threatening her, he'll answer me." Clarice shook her head frantically. "You don't understand. He has connections too." "I don't care who he knows." Ethan's voice cut like steel. "You saved my sons. You gave them their voices back. You think I'm gonna let anyone hurt you?" If you're on the edge of your seat right now, drop a comment and let me know. And please subscribe if you want to see how this gets even more intense. Mr. Corleone, Clarice began. Ethan, he interrupted. My name is Ethan, and you're family now. That means you're protected. No negotiation. Diane looked between them, her expression softening. She can't stay hidden forever. She won't be hiding. Ethan pulled out his phone. She'll be living here, officially, legally, with full security detail and every protection my resources can buy. Why? Clarice's voice broke. Why would you do this for someone you barely know? Ethan looked at her. This woman walked into his broken home and pieced it back together with patience and love, who gave his sons their mother's lullaby, who taught him how to be a father again. Because you did what I should have done from the beginning, he said quietly. You showed up, not for money or recognition, but because you saw two children who needed someone to believe in them. You risked everything to protect vulnerable people, and now someone wants to punish you for having courage. His jaw tightened. That's not happening. Not on my watch. Tears spilled down Clarice's cheeks. You deserve safety, peace, a life where you're not looking over your shoulder. He turned to Diane. What do you need? Statements? Evidence? Names? Diane pulled a folder from her bag. Everything's in here, but Dr. Vance's lawyers will drag this out for years. And in the meantime, Clarice stays here, with round-the-clock security. Ethan was already texting his head of security. No one gets through these gates without my approval, and I'm filing a restraining order by the end of business today. From their chairs, Oliver made a sound not quite a word, but urgent. Felix followed, both boys sensing the tension in the room. Clarice moved to them instinctively, her hands gentle as she calmed them. It's okay, babies. Everything's okay. But Ethan saw the fear in her eyes, the way her hands shook, the weight of months running, hiding, surviving. Clarice, he said softly, look at me. She turned, vulnerable in a way he never saw. You're not alone anymore, he promised. Whatever comes next, we face it together. You, me, and these boys who love you. Understood? She opened her mouth to argue, to protest, to push back against kindness she thought she didn't deserve. But something in his expression stopped her. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Clarice Sullivan let herself believe she might actually be safe. Understood, she whispered. Outside, storm clouds gathered again over Houston. But inside the nursery, surrounded by two miracle boys and a man who finally learned what it meant to protect the people who mattered, something shifted. Fear was still there. Danger still loomed. But now they'd face it as a family, and families didn't run. They fought. The threat came 48 hours later. A black SUV idled outside the estate gates at 2 a.m. Security footage showed a man in expensive clothes stepping out, standing in full view of the cameras, and holding up a sign with 4 words, I know she's here. By morning, Clarice was gone. Ethan found her note on the nursery rocking chair, her handwriting shaky. I won't let him hurt your family. Thank you for everything. Take care of my boys. The twins were inconsolable. Oliver cried until he vomited. Felix went completely silent, his eyes empty again, stealing. The light she brought extinguished in an instant. Find her, Ethan barked at his security chief. Now. Sir, she disabled her phone, left her car. She knows how to disappear. Ethan's world crumbled. He promised her safety and failed. Now his sons were breaking all over again, and the woman who saved them was out there alone, vulnerable, running from a monster with money and power. He looked at Oliver and Felix, their small faces wet with tears, reaching toward the empty doorway where Clarice should be. Da! Oliver whimpered. Da! Help. His son was asking him to help. Ethan fell to his knees between them. I will, buddy, I promise. Daddy's gonna bring her home. But as the hours ticked by with no leads, that promise felt like a lie. It was Felix who broke the silence. At 3 p.m., while Ethan frantically coordinated with private investigators, Felix made a sound he'd never made before, loud, insistent. Book! Ethan spun around. What? Felix's eyes were locked on Clarice's small notebook, the one she always wrote in. It sat on the changing table, forgotten in her rush to leave. Ethan grabbed it, hands shaking as he flipped through pages. Grocery lists, daily schedules, observations about the twins, and near the back an address circled in red, St. Catherine's Shelter, Dallas, Sister Maria Safe House. His heart was hammered. That's where she went. Oliver made a sound of agreement. These boys, his miracle boys, had just given him the key to finding her. Ethan kissed both their foreheads. You're brilliant, both of you, he called Diane. St. Catherine's Shelter. Does Clarice know someone there? Sister Maria helped her when she first ran, Diane confirmed. But if Dr. Vance finds out, he won't. I'm leaving now. Stay with me, friends. We're almost to the finish line. Drop a comment if you're rooting for this family. Ethan made the 3-hour drive in two, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. St. Catherine's was a modest building in a quiet Dallas neighborhood. Sister Maria met him at the door, a small woman with steel in her eyes. She doesn't want to be found, the nun said. My sons need her, and she needs to know she's not alone. Something in his voice must have convinced her. She led him to a small room where Clarice sat on a cot, her face buried in her hands. Clarice, she looked up, shock and fear warring in her expression. You shouldn't be here. He'll trace you. Let him. Ethan crossed the room and knelt before her. I'm not leaving without you, and neither are Oliver and Felix. They'll be safer. They're dying without you. They've stopped eating, stopped trying to speak. You want to protect them? Then come home and fight with us, not alone. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so scared. I know. So am I. He took her hands, but we're stronger together. All of us. Please, Clarice, come home. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then finally, she nodded. They returned to Houston with a plan. Ethan's lawyers had been busy. Dr. Vance's connections crumbled under real scrutiny. His powerful friends scattered when subpoenas started flying. Turned out, wealthy didn't mean untouchable when you were facing federal charges for witness intimidation and patient abuse. The confrontation happened in a courthouse, not the streets. Ethan sat beside Clarice as she testified, her voice steady, her truth unshakable. Other victims came forward, emboldened by her courage. Dr. Vance's empire collapsed in 6 hours. When the judge issued a permanent restraining order and remanded Vance to custody pending trial, Clarice broke down sobbing. Not from fear this time, from relief. It's over, Ethan whispered, holding her as she shook. You're safe now. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Ethan's security cleared a path and they drove home in silence, the kind that felt like peace instead of emptiness. When they walked into the nursery, Oliver and Felix's eyes lit up like stars. Mama, Oliver cried clear as a bell, the word perfect. Mama home, Felix echoed. Clarice dropped to her knees, pulling both boys into her arms as they laughed and cried and spoke their first real sentences. Ethan watched, his heart so full it hurt. This was his family, broken and rebuilt, imperfect and miraculous, and finally, whole. 6 months later, the garden playground wasn't empty anymore. Oliver pushed himself on the swing slowly with effort, but moving. Felix sat in the sandbox, building castles with Clarice, his voice chattering non-stop about dragons and princesses. Physical therapy had worked wonders once the boys had something to fight for. They were never typical kids. The doctors were clear about that, but they were their version of whole, walking with braces, speaking in full sentences, laughing every single day. Ethan sat on the bench beside Clarice, watching his sons play. You know what today is? Thursday? 1 year since you walked into our lives. Clarice smiled softly. Best decision I ever made. Mine too. He pulled out a small box, which is why I have something for you. She opened it to find a key. What's this? Your house, the West Wing. I had it renovated. It's yours, permanently. He paused. If you want it to be. Tears filled her eyes. Ethan, you're not the maid, Clarice. You're their mother. The one who showed up when it mattered. The one who never stopped believing. His voice dropped. And you're the person who saved all three of us. She looked at him and saw something in his eyes she was too afraid to acknowledge before. Love, quiet, steady, and real. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. Good, he smiled. Because we're not letting you. From the swings, Oliver called out, Dada, Mama, watch! They both turned as he pumped his legs, the swing rising higher than ever before. Look at him go, Clarice breathed. Ethan took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. Yeah, look at all of us. As the Texas sun painted the sky gold, the Corleone family sat together in a garden that finally held laughter. 2 miracle boys, 1 brave woman, and a father who learned that the greatest wealth wasn't in his bank account. It was right here, at this moment, in this love that had grown from silence into symphony. Dear friends of Unbroken Truths, sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. Sometimes they arrive quietly, with nothing but courage and an open heart. Clarice didn't need money or status to change the world. She just needed to show up. And Ethan learned that real strength isn't control. It's a vulnerability. It's letting people in. Who touched your heart most in this story? Was it Clarice's bravery, Ethan's transformation, or those two beautiful boys who refused to give up? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if this story reminded you that miracles happen when we believe in them, please hit that like button, share this with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Unbroken Truths for more stories that will restore your faith in love. Because sometimes one small act of courage can change a life forever.